Okay, so I want to make a sort of follow-up video to my video saying that IQ actually measures a lack of intelligence. And I kind of was searching for a word or term that sort of talked about this sort of intelligence, right? At first I thought it might be like a different type of intelligence, but it's just it's just hypologic intelligence, right? At first I thought it was in the beginning I was calling it hyperlogical intelligence. I just thought people had this hyperlogical intelligence and then it was just very niche. But it's still very niche and it still can sort of thrive in a very narrow, shallow niche, but it's not hyperlogic, it's hypologic. It's like IQ tests measure this basically this sort of rudimentary logic, okay? This simple logic, okay? Which sort of explains this sort of math and grammar because math is actually just like simple logic in a sense because people with sort of a more deeper logic can do those things but without math and grammar and these technical languages, right? The same way those primitive technology videos, they don't they do this intricate architecture without math and these different various tools and that type of thing. Are these cultures that used made perfect architecture, pyramids with astronomical alignments, no written language, no written math? It's because they had this sort of they were utilizing this hyper logic in a sense. And you know, that's what was going on. Which right, it imbues this sort of perception essentially. But this hypologic almost is like this manual version of it where you use math and grammar as this sort of substitute logical intelligence or this substitute deeper logical intelligence or higher logical intelligence. Okay? So IQ tests do measure a lack of intelligence. Though this more, I mean, sometimes simple can be better, I guess, because again, it does thrive in these very narrow, shallow niches, and you can't beat its precision, right? Math, grammar enables this sort of hyper precision, but in most cases, generally speaking in life, you don't need that level of precision, right? A lot of you sort of people with hypologic, you know, you're going to be the people who utilize recipes. But there's people who can cook without recipes. They're using their higher logic, creative, intuitive intelligences to do that. Even without any of these tools, these recipes, they can make something, a dish, practically the same every time. But they can't make it exactly the same every time, right? Which is sort of this sort of hyperlogical approach to cooking, right? If you're using a recipe. But food doesn't have to taste exactly the same every time. It practically tastes the same every time where you don't really even notice it. It's not notable. Okay, and that's a lot of things in life. But even with still even the precision can be very high. Again, they make perfect astronomical alignments. The Cahokia pyramids in North America, no written language, no written math. Perfect astronomical alignments, perfect geometrical monuments in architecture. Same with the Incans. Okay, so precision can still be possible, but not this sort of hyper precision that you need for like certain aerospace engineering and that type of thing. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it just seems to be you. I've been sort of correlating hyperlogic with these populations, these higher IQ populations, but it's actually the opposite. And what it seems is that you got these, your strongest, you guys are, there's a stronger correlation between these higher IQ peoples and being hyper social. You guys have a hyper social intelligence, right? You kind of say it's like your hyper logic that helped you be so successful and to have these sort of successful and these people who had these successful invasions, right? These modern monarchical invasions that occurred, right? You kind of, people point to it like, yeah, it's because we're so smart in our high IQs, and that's how we did it. That wasn't what it did. It was more. That's not what happened. It was just access to guns. It was like sheer brutality that made these monarchical invasions so successful. But also your hyper social intelligence. Hyper social intelligence enables people to create these sort of mega tribes, right? If you look in Africa, there's these higher concentrations of people with, you know, there's higher concentrations of, creative intelligence, people with higher and creative intelligence, practical intelligence, that type of thing. But there is lower amounts of sort of, social intelligence, right? Which is why you get there's these thousands upon thousands of tribes, because they don't have this sort of social grace essentially to form these very big tribes. You have to have a very high social intelligence to do that. Or maybe that's just also hyposocial intelligence. If you have a very hyposocial intelligence, yeah, actually that's a lot. You guys just have hyposocial intelligence as well. Pretty much, which explains why there's almost this pre-scripted, like, it seems like cordiality and, manners and this type of thing. It's like this sort of manufactured social intelligence. No, I think that's just being extra. You guys do have this hyper social intelligence, and that's why those monarchical invasions were so successful. Numbers, essentially. Okay. Like a jaguar doesn't have that high of a social intelligence, which is why they're sort of solitary animals. But wolves have a very high social intelligence, so they're able to form these packs. You can see their sort of social intelligence when you're observing these wolf packs and that type of thing. That's what you guys kind of enabled, and you created these mega tribes, okay, which were able to sort of squash these tribes or micro tribes. Right, because they had these more higher practical intelligence and that type of thing. Okay. Concentration wise. So IQ actually measures hypologic. Just like, again, how vision tests measure, the higher the number, the sort of less clear vision that you have. So if you have 20/20 vision, you have very sharp, deep vision. If you have 20/40/60, your vision's getting more and more blurry. It's becoming more and more shallow, to the point you're going to need glasses. And then you hypological types use math and grammar and these technical languages like glasses, like hearing aids. as almost substitute intelligences, because you almost, it's almost like you over invested, not over invested, just became very niche, where you, I mean, it just seemed like social intelligence became paramount, where it's like you can't have it all. Like, you invested all your, it's like, it has like RPG vibes. You invested all your intelligence points into social intelligence, essentially. And, you know, which lowered your other intelligences. Where you have to use substitute intelligences to navigate, essentially. Okay, and then society has been catered around people with hypersocial intelligence and hypological intelligence, right? Um, where it's almost like if you don't have, you have to almost have a lack of intelligence to thrive in a lot of these societies. You have to have a lower logical intelligence to do well in school. Because math and reading, it's just like basic pattern recognition. If you're good at this sort of pattern recognition, people with sort of hypological intelligence, these lower logical intelligences, right? It's like it's a rudimentary logical intelligence, almost like a manual logical intelligence. Because people with higher logical intelligence, it's passive. It just becomes this perception. You don't have to use labels and formulas and equations to do what they just automatically kind of do. Okay, that's almost why I feel like people with hyperlogical intelligence or higher logical intelligence do bad on like tests and stuff. It's like if you have it's like someone with sharp hearing wearing a hearing aid. There's interference, there's overload. That's what's happening with people reading and doing math and that type of thing. Okay, because again, people are pointing to these higher IQ things, like, look at what it brought you. It's like, that's not what happened. Like, I don't know, maybe there's a correlation with hypersocial intelligence and industrialism, because that's kind of why, like, all these cultures with these different concentrations of intelligence would have eventually done all this technology and advancements, just at a slower pace. It was just this industrialism that sort of fueled this quantum leap in knowledge and technology. Or something. And because all of those things are possible without math and reading and writing and these technical languages. Okay, because even it is like a technical languages. It's like you, people with hypological intelligence, you use almost technical languages, like almost like echolocation. Okay, which is why I noticed that a lot of you guys cling to this, caste system, so-called race, this appearance-based caste system, because it's like, if you say stop identifying people as black, it's like they almost disappear for you. Like, you lose track of them, and that's scary to you. But some of us don't need this surveillance system, because, I mean, you just don't have to be scared of people. Like, in the U.S., black identified people do commit more street crime, but hypological types seem to, since it's this sort of simple logical intelligence, it becomes this oversimplification, this overgeneralization, where now black coded passing people equals dangerous, so you feel like you, that doesn't mean, but then logic will tell you that, higher logic will tell you that doesn't mean all black coded passing people are. Like, so you don't have to hyper track black coded passing people for safety, but that's harder because of these sort of, because of your niche intelligence, I guess you could say. Like, this is not a rank or degrading people, that's just the reality of the situation. I mean, but you guys are very, very hyper social intelligent people. Even sort of, I realized, like, Oriental coded passing people, like the most passing, you guys are sort of associated with having this low social intelligence, but you guys have the highest. I mean, concentration wise, you have the highest. Like Chinese, like you guys have a hyper mega tribe, like China. Like there's this sort of level of unity that can't be achieved. Like it's just so hyper social grace, where you guys, like, there's no social friction because you guys' social intelligence is so high. Which enabled you to form these sort of hyper mega tribes. You're not hyper logical, you're hyper social. But being hyper social has made it sort of, unless they're in this very specific niche, like what's something with a very specific niche? Outside of that niche, it's sort of, navigation is more challenging, so society has been engineered and rigged around you, which is unfair. Like, there can be spaces for everyone. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, IQ measures a lack of intelligence. It's measuring a lack of logical intelligence. This sort of rudimentary logical intelligence.